All right, how's everybody doing today? Good? Excellent. So welcome to our panel here on CMMC. My name is Nick Mishler. I am the Service Delivery Manager for Commtech. I've been with Commtech Industries for 7 going on 8 years now. Worked my way up from a field technician, engineer, engineering lead, and now the service manager. Today, like I said, this panel is going to be about CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Now, some of you may be saying, well, I don't think that really applies to me, but the reason why we at Commtech think this is a really important panel for everyone to at least sit in on and listen to is that while the other compliance standards are very good for companies, they don't come with a certification, right? Some governing body that tells you you are compliant now. CMMC does. It is an actual attainable, achievable, you are this level of CMMC stamped and approved. And so that makes it, very valuable from a business perspective. There's not as much guesswork in it, if that makes sense. I'm not going to drone on, though, about it because we have actual experts up here to talk about it, and that is not me. Right. I'm very honored to be up here with them. They chose me because the other 10 people they asked didn't show up. So without further ado. So directly to my left here, this is Tim Weber, who I'm sure you guys heard from earlier. He is the Director of Security for Adnet. He, by the way, if you haven't looked at the bio, he's been published in the New York Times, so kind of a big deal. No, not a big deal. Over here we have Jacob from PAX 8. Jacob is the cybersecurity consultant out there. PAX 8 is a great partner of ours. PAX 8 provides a great service to MSPs like us when we need help with our products, figuring out what's on the horizon, the best solutions for our clients, things like that. Next to him, we have William Dudley. William is our Director of Operations over at Commtech. He's got over 20 years of experience in the IT industry. Spent some time as a government contractor working in the information sector. William is also my boss, so if you're wondering why the moderator isn't telling him to speed it up, that's why. Next to William, we have Jason Groen. He is Sales Engineering Director of EDR team for Fortinet. I think you guys heard earlier when he went through the Fortinet detonation. Very cool stuff. And last, we have Jim Shook, who is Director of Cybersecurity and Compliance Practice at Dell. He is a recognized authority of the intersection of law and technology and has a very long bio, so I wasn't going to go through all of it. But yes. Great. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to get into some questions we have here. And of course, there'll be a chance for anyone to ask anything that's drum up from these questions. All right. You guys ready to go? All right. First up, I have a question for Tim. So Tim, not everyone here is going to know what CMMC is, although I think I gave a very good explanation already. Would you mind giving us a brief overview of what it is?
Yeah, so thanks again for everybody coming out today. CMMC was an attempt by the government to really put some structure around making sure the organizations that are involved in the defense industrial base, so really anybody that's doing, sorry, this keeps cutting in and out, any type of manufacturing or service that plays into anything in the defense space, put some structure around what do they need to do from a computer security standpoint. And the reason for that is we've hemorrhaged information over the last 10 years, to various nation states because there was an absolute kind of hodgepodge of different requirements, and it was very confusing. And depending on the day and depending on who you talk to, what did you need to require? So a lot of this stuff started to come out in 2019, and ironically went into effect in January 2020, which that was awesome timing. And it put into a structure this concept of these 5 levels, CMMC 1 through CMMC 5. And different organizations had to meet those levels based off of what type of information they handled. And it was broken down into two different categories. One is called FCI, because you can't work with the government or IT and not be talking in acronyms, which is federal contract information. So not necessarily secret stuff, but stuff that they don't want to get out. And that was lower level stuff. So that was organizations that had requirements around that, had to meet either CMMC level 1 or CMMC level 2. The bigger requirements were around the concept of CUI, which is controlled unclassified information, and you had to be at a minimum of CMMC level 3 for that. And what each level had was it mapped pretty directly to the NIST 800-171 framework, but each one actually required more pieces beyond that. So obviously to be CMMC level 3, you had to meet levels 1 and 2 as well. It was very much additive.
And so how is CMMC different from like a HIPAA or a PCI compliance?
So because the government doesn't trust anybody, is basically how it kind of worked out. In PCI and HIPAA, unless you have some type of an event, nobody's going to come and check your security for you. Nobody has to give you that stamp. And the concept behind CMMC is that you would work to get CMMC, get to a level, and then you would have a third-party attestation agency come in. Again, acronyms, a C3PAO organization come in to basically certify you to say, okay, you said you were going for CMMC level 3, you actually meet all the requirements for it. And what they were looking at is organizations such as accounting firms. You can think of it, if anybody's ever gone through a SOC 2 audit or really any type of audit where you've got to get an actual stamp, that was the big difference is that you needed to have that third-party organization come in and actually sign off. It was intended for this to all be in effect by 2026, where they started out with a certain number of prime contractors each year, but there were some recent rule changes that have actually changed that a little bit further. So we're still waiting on some of the details, but it's at some point in the not too distant future. Who does anybody do defense contract work? Just out of curiosity. No. Okay. Cool. Is to do that type of work, you would actually have to be CMMC certified. So it's really kind of putting some teeth to it that didn't exist before.
Nice. Okay. And I heard there is a CMMC 2.0.
Yep. So
is there a lot of changes?
Yeah. So there was a couple big changes, and then there was changes to the changes because again we're dealing with the federal government here. Back last fall, I want to say it was November. They released CMMC 2.0, which created two really big changes. One was they went from 5 levels to 3. So level 1 basically stayed the same. Level 2 is now the old level 3, and level 3 is now the old level 5. The other big thing that they did was for people that are at CMMC level 1, they got rid of the need to actually have the third-party attestation. So at CMMC level 1, you can actually do self-attestation. They tried to split level 2 into 2 parts, but 2 weeks ago they actually announced that, nope, we're not doing that. So if you're only at level 1, which means you're dealing with FCI, not CUI, you can actually do a self-attestation, but they've made it abundantly clear that if somebody attests to that and they're not meeting it, they're actually going to go after them for the False Claims Act. So the government's not messing around with this. But that change has now pushed out the cycle another, somewhere between 9 to 18 months potentially. We're still seeing the rules come in. The split of level 2 just changed literally 2 weeks ago on us. So,
wow, thanks. Next one's for William. So, William, how can an organization know if they need a CMMC certification, and how do they know what level they need it at?
Well, I think Tim covered a lot of this. Especially if you're dealing with CUI data or you're in the supply chain for the DoD, you're definitely going to be required it. Most of the time, it's going to be on your contract renewals. So as the renewals come up, they'll be asking for it, much like they used to make you do the 800-171 self-attestation. They're going to make you give the same certification information in the future. So if you're dealing with CUI, there'll be a higher level requirement, but generally it's indicated on the defense contract.
Okay. So how can IT support teams help their organizations prepare for CMMC?
Well, this is really a big one, right? Number one is stay current with your patching, right? IT teams always stay current, not just on your OS patches. Make sure your OSs don't go out of date. Can't tell you how many 2008 servers are still out there in the world. Make sure your firewalls have the latest patches. I mean, even Fortinet here, right? Make sure it's up to date, right? Everything. Number 2 is make sure you're doing annual security assessments. I mean, That includes all the stuff that you would typically do, penetration test, internal test, vulnerability testing, train your people, security awareness training. 85% of attacks happen by the end user. So train people, do phishing tests to make sure, and constantly be on the lookout and do roadmaps on how you're going to get to where you need to be. So use things like CMMC or any kind of compliance. Really, a lot of them all have the same premise of constant improvement because the hackers are getting better, and so you have to get better.
Awesome. What are the basic domains of CMMC, and how does this benefit organizations?
Again, it's more about the framework. That it's a lot like any other framework, whether it's all these other compliances. It is 17 domains, or categories, as I like to refer to them as. There's a whole bunch of controls, but it lets you, compartmentalize what you're trying to solve and come together with a plan of action. Some of those include things like asset management, identity and authentication, security training, security awareness, how you're going to do disaster recovery. These are all kind of things that we talk about in every seminar you ever go to, but it's compartmentalizing it so you can isolate it. How you're going to attack it.
Yeah, and if I can add in one thing, it's a lot of policy work, which isn't really interesting. It's kind of the bane of my existence at times, but you have to have these policies in place, and then you have to show that you're meeting them. And I would argue that it's some of these some of these CMMC levels are almost 3/4 of that. That you have to be able to, the keynote talked about it this morning. State what you're doing, and then show that you've actually done it. So.
Awesome. All right, the next one is for Jacob. Jacob, so can you help explain what a gap analysis is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I work primarily with MSPs. At Pax8, we help MSPs who manage end customers. We provide solutions for them that they can use in different categories: email, endpoint, security awareness training, so on and so forth. And obviously, different compliances require different things. When we're talking about NIST and CIS controls, really it's about proving you have defensibility in place. So if you do get audited, you can say, yes, I've got X, Y, and Z in place. I have these policies in place. I've reporting. I have all that automated. With CMMC, it's more of you need to meet a checklist, and you're going to get audited to make sure that all of those requirements are actually met before you get that stamp. So at Pax8, obviously, we help MSPs who have customers that work with DoD contracts that are now required to obtain usually level 3 is what we see in regards to the certification level that they have to actually obtain. So we are helping MSPs essentially, and obviously that creates a whole new kind of business of making sure that these customers can meet these requirements in each of the different levels. So gap analysis is the idea of these MSPs are helping customers who need to reach a certain level of requirements essentially come in. They identify all the different domains. They identify where they align with NIST and where their possible gaps are, so they can help them meet those requirements. So really, it's getting a really good idea of what a customer has in place, what they need to have in place for DoD to work with those DoD contracts, and then making sure that they can actually meet those requirements.
Gotcha. So building out a roadmap for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So strictly roadmap. This is what you need to do. This is where your gaps are, and this is where I can help you. Get to the level that you need to.
So what is FedRAMP? How does that apply here? So
FedRAMP is the Federal Risk Authentication Management Program. So essentially, this is what the federal government is put in place for the vendor side. So obviously, these customers need to come in order to obtain the certain level they need. They obviously need solutions to meet those requirements. So a backup solution, a mobile device management solution. So just to name a few, we have, these are some of the solutions we sell at Pax8. Drop Suite, one of them in the backup area, IBM Mass 360 in the mobile device management area. These are vendors that are actually FedRAMP authorized. In order to become FedRAMP authorized, there's a number of hoops and stuff that you have to do on the vendor side. It's a long process. You need to actually become authorized in. There's different levels of FedRAMP that you need to, essentially go through. But essentially, FedRAMP is the federal government's way of authorizing vendors, approved vendors that customers can use if they're dealing with CUI primarily.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah. So obviously, these vendors need to make sure that they're protecting the CUI if their customers are using it. So these vendors go through FedRAMP authorization to actually make sure that they're protecting that information and storing it properly. So essentially anything that stores and transfers DoD government type of CUI needs to be FedRAMP authorized, and that's a big stamp of approval nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. All right, next question I have is for Jason. So, Jason, how can an organization such as yours help navigate the requirements of CMMC?
Yeah, so, we have Fortinet's got a big presence in the DoD. We have a whole Fed team. So we're very much, sort of following what's going on with CMMC. So it depends. I think, because the question was asked about how many defense contractors, and I don't think there were much in the room. But what I think is going to happen with CMMC is we're going to get trickle down, where people are going to go, well, this is what the federal government's doing. Can I use that in my enterprise? And so, Fortinet specifically is working on a few things on one, getting the CMCs, the CMMC certifications on some of the products themselves, but then long-term coming up with solutions. So it's more of instead of buying, a whole bunch of individual Legos, we want to be able to give you a box that has the instructions. You may have to put some of the Legos together, but here's the instructions to get to the ultimate solution, which is, the certification.
Awesome. So if CMMC, if the goal is to check a bunch of requirements off here, what would you prioritize? What would be your top one to three things people should be looking into?
Well, so if you normally ask me in general, and it's been mentioned before, but if you say the top three things for anything that's related to cybersecurity, and even I think CMMC is patch, and then when you're done patching, patch again. And then patch a third time, right? And so, that'll stop all cyber attacks. Well, I shouldn't say stop all cyber attacks, but I think, picking a vendor, a third-party vendor, I should say, that, like a Commtech, someone that can help you navigate the CMMC world is helpful, right? Because, I work for Fortinet. I'm biased, so my products can move the sun, the moon, and the earth all at the same time. But getting somebody who kind of looks at things more of at a holistic view, if you will, as a third party is always very, very helpful, because you're going to have different vendors who are better in different areas to meet those requirements.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, next one is for Jim. So Jim, CMMC has a foundation in protecting federal data. What are some of the ways that organizations can ensure that data is resilient and protected?
So a lot of the kind of high-level buzzword just takes out of CMMC for just a second that we're hearing out there is organizations need to be more cyber resilient. And that means survive, withstand, and recover from these constant attacks. And clearly CMMC is along that path. Where I focus is really on recovery capabilities. So the worst has happened. You've had the ransomware destructive attack. How are you going to recover? I think CMMC, at least as it stands now, and Tim, maybe there's going to be some more changes, but really missed the boat here. It's got very basic backup capabilities there. Like, great, have a backup. Yeah, absolutely. But you look at all the guidance coming out from CISA and others talking about the next step. So protect that backup different ways, offline. If you were in my discussion, we talked a lot about a lot of those different things. So there's a basic piece there, but I think reflecting the fact that some of these attacks are going to be successful, it would be useful to have those recover capabilities be a little bit more resilient, and maybe we'll get that with the next one.
So, do you have something to add, Tim? Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that what it's kind of showing, I appreciate that the government didn't try to reinvent the wheel, but now NIST has to keep up, with updating those standards. because I'm with you, which is as I've mentioned 3 times already, I'm a pessimist. I'm going to assume breach. I'm going to assume a compromise is going to happen. What's my ability to recover from that type of thing? So I don't necessarily know that we'll see that change within CMMC. I think some of the NIST pieces are going to have to get, I think to your point, more granular, because we talked about the backups. Having an offsite backup's great until it's connected to the same network and the threat actors can get to it and they wipe it before they launch a ransomware. So.
Good point. Jim, so what are some of the legal concerns about data on an organization if they've become compromised or breached?
We talked about those earlier this morning. There's so many different things that can happen depending on what laws are applying to you, and clearly CMMC is a very specific subset. I think, and I don't know that compliance with CMMC is going to get you out of anything that might happen to you under a different set of laws, but following any framework and being certified to it is always going to be a good thing. It's going to be a defense in many cases. I touched on some of the things in my presentation. In certain states, if you're following a framework, you kind of get a get out of jail free card, some of the privacy laws and things like that. So I really like CMMC at any level because it gives you a very concrete group of standards to follow, developed by what's not a disinterested third party, but they're not, a vendor specific type of party. And having 3 levels is really powerful too. I think that's one of the things that we're missing in some of these other frameworks. For CMMC, level 1, 2, 3 is based on the type of data that you handle. I know a lot of organizations were aspiring to 5 and now to 3. But that's a great kind of graduation that lets you decide how much money, how much time, how much effort do you want to spend to get to whichever level, which is going to help to factor in your risk tolerance, your budgets, and things like that. So I think there's a lot there. As I said, it's not going to be a get out of jail free card, but it could go a long way. Any standard that you're going to ascribe to and follow is going to help you.
Awesome.
Yeah, just to add to that, obviously CMMC is something that you have to prove and then you get certified for. Unlike different frameworks like NIST, like CIS, we're making a kind of a more of a motion to help our MSP partners follow the CIS controls. So very similar to CMMC, there's about 18 different controls, and they really spell out every category of security, including backup, because obviously backup is a part of security. And really, it really provides some fine details on how to stay compliant in each of those different domains. There's different implementation groups, so you can prove, this is where I'm at in this particular control. And then as you go on, obviously the 3rd level implementation group is where you want to be. But just something that you can take and say, hey, I have these steps in place. You're not necessarily certified, but it's, if something does happen, you get audited, something, you get breached, you can say, look, this is all of my controls, my protections that I have in place. This is what I'm doing to provide defensibility. And then, that goes a long way instead of showing up to, an audit and saying, I have things in place, but I can't necessarily prove it.
So a way to show you were at least trying, right?
Exactly.
You weren't being, aloof with your data. You were actually trying to protect it. Negligent, right?
Yeah, negligent. Yep.
Good way of putting it.
And again, that's not something that you need to, get to work with DoD contractors. That's something that you should have just for all of your customers. So it's a good framework to fall back on.
So, Tim, do you see practices like CMMC making their way to local governments or commercial sectors? I mean, I think that was kind of touched on, but
yeah, I mean, I think Jim hit on it, and interestingly enough, Connecticut's one of the states that did just put in a safe harbor provision where if you meet, I think there's 8 different certifications, any one, not all 8 of them. Oh my God, that'd be awful. If you meet any one of these 8, it actually protects you from punitive damages if you do have a cybersecurity event. Again, coming back to the keynote this morning, the amount of regulations are just going to continue to increase. Not surprisingly, legislation is behind the curve on this stuff because the technology is changing so rapidly. But we just saw it get signed last week as part of the omnibus spending bill, mandatory incident reporting, which is, there's no definition around it, but it's thought to be critical sectors, so DoD manufacturing, energy, chemicals, health and human services, emergency services. So probably actually cast a net almost everybody in this room, where you're going to now have 72 hours to report an event, 24 hours after you pay a ransomware. So I think this is the model. And again, to agree with Jim, I'm a huge fan of the kind of the graduated model, because I look at healthcare and I look at HIPAA. Why does my 10-person family practice office have to meet the same requirements as the biggest hospital in my state? It's not scalable, it's not necessarily relevant, and it's not affordable. So the legislation is going to continue. That's why events like these are so important. And kudos to Commtech, because you guys have pulled together a really kind of interesting group that hits it from the technical standpoint, hits it from the insurance, from the legal, the financial, from a vendor partner standpoint. All of these things play into it. This is all I do, and this stuff is tough to keep up with, as a practitioner of it. So, continue to come to these events, continue to read the content that all of us put out. But I think this is just going to continue to grow and grow exponentially, because the threats, again, to Daryl's point from this morning, the threats aren't going away. Nothing's changing faster in IT than cybersecurity is.
Very true. Very true. So, William, to kind of go off what Tim's talking about here, in Louisiana specifically, are we seeing any enforcement of this, or signs that these mandates are actually being enforced?
Surprisingly, this is one of the things Louisiana is pretty much upfront about, and the reason being is, some of this is because of John Bell Edwards just being more looking forward on this, and some of it is the attacks. Right? We had our DMV attacked, our state site attacked, 4 schools attacked in 2 years. I mean, we've had so many attacks. I mean, you've had law changes. In 2018, I think the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission was created. That has 15 board members. That was put in by Edwards. Also in 2018, they made an amendment to the Data Breach Notification Act. And then in 2020, they changed Louisiana insurance policies, HB 614, to have their own security plans. And then 2021, the big one was that MSPs that deal with public bodies were required to register with the Secretary of State on, being good standing, and they had a requirement to report any breaches or pays within 60 days.
All right. So, Jason, not everyone in here raised their hand. I don't think nobody raised their hand about thinking they needed to be CMMC compliant. But what are some other frameworks others can be using to help them out?
Yeah, I mean, Tim talked about it earlier. The NIST framework, the NIST cybersecurity framework's really, really good because it is, in CMC. And Tim, you've read more about it than me, but I think CMMC is still based on a lot of the NIST stuff. So there's a lot of similarities, and they added things. But that's a really good one, right? Because NIST is more general. I work with a lot with PCI as well. A lot of Fortinet's business has been PCI, and I always remind CISOs, VPs, anybody that's more on the executive side. And I'm like, just because you pass your PCI audit does not mean you are secure, right? It's like just because you ate a salad for lunch doesn't mean you're healthy. It's you did something good that day, yay. It's a continuous thing, right? And so I would say NIST, for those that are not DoD required, is the NIST, was it 801? Remember you said it earlier?
171.
171, thank you. Yeah, I always just call it the general NIST cybersecurity framework. If you just Google that, you'll find that. And then, but yeah, I mean, it just depends on the industry you're in. If you're regulated by PCI, you got to be PCI compliant. But don't let that be your high watermark. Go beyond PCI. I actually used to do a presentation years ago called Beyond PCI, and it's like PCI is great. Keep going. So
great. All right. This next one here is for everybody, so everyone can pitch in on this one. So what are some other things we're noticing, ways to tighten standards for cybersecurity being applied or required to the small, medium business market?
I'll start.
I know you wanted to.
Yeah, obviously the increased compliance frameworks, but the insurance industry, the cyber insurance industry is absolutely cracking down because they're tired of having to pay out these claims. So we are seeing a dramatic increase in premiums that organizations are having to pay, exclusions, and sheer requirements. And you know, a lot of organizations take security seriously, but still far too many don't. Until it starts hitting them in the wallet, I don't think we're going to do it. So I kind of applaud the cybersecurity insurance groups because I think they're starting to force a lot of the right things.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously with MSPs, they need cyber insurance as well. They deal with customers that need cyber insurance. So what we're seeing at PAX 8 is these cyber insurance requirements, like Tim mentioned, are getting a lot more strict. No longer can you have an EDR system in place. You need to have an EDR system that does X, Y, and Z, for example. So definitely cracking down, and they don't want to pay out to someone who is completely unprotected. So starting to see those restrictions.
And what is an EDR? What's that acronym, EDR?
Oh, endpoint detection and response. Sorry. So Jason covered it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that was
Fortinet.
the
There's
40 EDR.
40 EDR.
Just want to give everybody a reminder. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Other EDR solutions out there, they have to be doing this to be actually to be cyber.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what they said, yeah, I see it every day where customers call us and say, hey, my cyber insurance said, I don't think anyone here is McAfee. Sorry if you are. But my McAfee agent's not getting it done for us anymore. Per my cyber insurance crew or my carrier, I need to go with EDR, right? Endpoint detection response. I need something more hardcore than just signature based. And it can be, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars savings in their premiums. So it's one of those things where, let's say the EDR solution costs you $30,000. Well, okay, but you're saving $50 on your premium or whatever the premiums are. So usually it comes out in the wash as a financial incentive. But we're seeing that, the SEC, as Tim mentioned, now requires the reporting. But if you're a publicly traded company, you're not a small or medium-sized business, obviously. So.
Add to that a little bit. Definitely see the cyber insurers driving some of this. I wonder where it goes though, because you're looking at the session from before that was really good on cyber insurance, talking about 500% increases in some cases. Right, those are higher risk organizations, carving out a lot of the pieces there. So maybe if I have a ransom payment, I have to pay half of it. Limits on the amount of business interruption and things like that. So at what point do small organizations just go, meh, no cyber insurance? And so then what's going to drive it? So I'm involved in a couple of initiatives where, it's all incumbent upon all of us. It needs to be a business driver. So, this isn't something you have to do. This should be something that you should do. There's some studies in the privacy area where organizations that take their privacy seriously supposedly are getting more business. Consumers are starting to move to them. I don't know how clean those studies are, but it's an interesting idea. One of the initiatives I'm involved with, and it's not small, medium business, but called Sheltered Harbor. And for, they're kind of early stages here, but you think about when you used to go into a bank, there's a sticker, it's FDIC insured, right? So if this bank goes under, I know the FDIC is going to pay what's in my account up to whatever, 250,000. So Sheltered Harbor is the same kind of a thing, that they're protecting their data in a manner that if that bank was attacked and crippled by a ransomware attack, they have the ability to continue to serve you. And I think those kinds of things. So we have one customer who's in the market trade, in stock market trades. They are doing that because they want to roll it out to their customers and say, we really care about you. We're aligning to this program. So again, not small, medium business, but I think some buying behaviors needs to be part of your business. That will hopefully drive a little bit more of these standards. People want to comply because they don't want to be the shop down the hall or down the street that nobody wants to go to anymore.
Awesome. Good answers. Good answers. Anybody else want to chime in there? So I actually got a text message this morning from a client saying their cybersecurity insurance told them today that they need to put two-factor on their VPNs or they're going to drop the policy by the end of the week. And luckily, we installed Fortinet's beforehand, and they automatically do it. And so, or not automatically, they have it built in.
We did not plan that.
So yeah. So no, I would show you all the text message, but that I don't think the client would like that probably. But so yeah, the cybersecurity insurance stuff is a driver, and it's things where we're having to answer no to things that we were answering yes to 3 years ago because the wording slightly changed, and now it's much more aggressive. So, all right. Any questions? Anybody in the cloud? I see one right there. That's great. Great question.
So the short answer is yes. All of the above, basically. Because if you look at a lot of the state regulations, it's based off of what's the domicile of the person you have the data on, not where you're doing business. So I've spent, obviously being in the Northeast, spent a lot of time with the SHIELD Act in New York and Mass CMR 17201, and those very, very clearly state. And there's a lot of copycats on that, and most of the stuff that I'm seeing is that. And that's one of the absolute challenges right now is a lot of states have done their own thing, and I'm hoping that, I don't typically hope that people follow what Connecticut does, but in the Connecticut regulations where it was not, they didn't make up their own set of rules, it was based off of one of these frameworks. I actually think you're going to see more of that because that takes the state out of dictating, having to be uber technical, rather point back to a standard and let the standards bodies kind of deal with that.
I want the record to reflect that Tim says he's a pessimist, but he just used hope twice in the context of legislation. So I'm not, yeah. So what we've seen, and I've done data privacy stuff for a while, is if you're in that situation, you really have two choices. One is you can comply with the most difficult one for all your data. The other is you can somehow magically split all of your data into all the different jurisdictions and then apply those individually. And the second one is far worse than the first. And so you wind up with, de facto, the federal law is whichever state is the most stringent, which I think is going to be Virginia coming up when that gets passed, has been California. Or you just go GDPR-like, and it sucks. But that's the only way to have that type of compliance when you're across all those different jurisdictions.
Yeah, and we've done that from a CMMC standpoint because one of the things that we've done is, if it's a manufacturer that does a little bit of defense work, is it worth it to try and separate out that data to figure it out and only do the controls around that? And 9 times out of 10, it's just, let's just treat everything like it's CMMC, or same thing in healthcare. Let's just treat it all like it's PHI, because then this way we don't, have a, theoretically, the accidental data misclassification, because classifying data is a royal pain in the butt. So if you just treat everything like it's sensitive, then, I'm not going to say hope, theoretically, you're going to be good. So
that was a great question. Thank you. I think we have time for probably one more question. Is there any others in the crowd? No? Okay. What follow up?
That's a cool. Wow, that's like a mic drop moment. Nice job.
That's going to be on the next bar exam test here in the state. We'll get you the royalties for that. Yeah, it's for the most part. If that's part of you, if that's not a normal part of your business and you have those agreements in place and somebody goes around that, it's not your responsibility. That's a very general statement because at some point, if you know people are working around it or you wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you encourage it. But, I think about that with some of the cloud providers not, it's pretty much past this now, but not doing business associate agreements. Like we don't want your healthcare information. We are not going to provide a BAA. So if you, as a customer, work around that, like you've created a problem, cloud provider has been very clear with their position on that. And as long as that's really holding up, you don't have an affirmative responsibility, but it might be something you want to keep an eye on. Because I think just like things like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA, if you're doing some basic things and identifying problem areas and saying you got to stop, then you probably in a little bit better legal position. But you got to be careful what you take on as an ongoing responsibility. So definitely something to mull over a little bit. I think there's some vague generalities there that would come to light with your, yeah.
So this is kind of that trickle down of the supply chain where he doesn't have a specific need, but his clients do, and he's holding their data, therefore it becomes his need kind of thing, right?
Well, so I'm not an attorney, but I have, but I could play one on TV. But I've had customers where, for example, let's say I want to buy something for you, and I send you my credit card information in a file name or like just clear text. That is on me. And again, this could be changed state to state, and I'm not an attorney, but I've had talked to attorneys that do this, and they were like, "Well, who was the ding dong?" And I was like, "Well, meaning like if I put like, or I send you a file that's like Gron, Jason, Social Security number, all that information. Well, who created the file name? Well, that was me that broke it. Now, granted, I'm not held. I can't be held liable to PCI because I don't process credit card information. But my understanding is that you wouldn't be, as the business, held liable because I'm the goofball that did it in clear text. Again, talk to your attorney. That's my legal advice.
Yeah,
But
this is why lawyers exist.
yeah, exactly.
Who's the ding dong doctor? Well,
Keep it that way.
Great job finding the gray areas. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. Everybody, I want to thank our panels who did a fantastic job. I want to thank all of you for coming out for us. And everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy lunch and the rest of the speeches.